I think there would be a new surge of excitement because I think there are a lot of people that would go back, would love Street Fighter 4. It caused a boom in the fighting game community. This is an incredibly powerful title. Yes, there is a nostalgia factor, as there is with every one of these old games. These re-releases work, right? Capcom likes to do them, and the people like to play them. But there's another factor to it, and that's the updated with modern tech. Now that we know what we know, and we have the technology that we have, can you go back and make these games a little cleaner? I think that Street Fighter V feels relatively tired right now. Would you agree with that? Is that fair to say?
For sure.
So,
I mean, the game's done. Like, I mean, we're going to get balance updates. We're going to get a few other things, but like, the game is essentially over, and it's not an ideal time for it to be over. But it's kind of hanging on, and it's just not that beloved. Where Street Fighter 4 is maybe the most beloved Street Fighter entry ever, even over Street Fighter 2.
I don't know how to segue that.
Yeah,
I'm not going to
hard.
say, speaking of getting shot,
Yeah.
we want to talk about something this week that is, it's interesting because it's not really a question of if, but rather when. And so I suppose I'm asking, is when kind of now? And I guess by now I mean within this next year, within the coming months. But the big question is it time for Capcom to re-release Ultra Street Fighter 4 with rollback netcode?
The answer you're looking for, John, is hell freaking yes. Yes.
Really, this is coming from a person that's as there's a lot of people that are like, oh, one on Street Fighter 4, it's the best, and I think you were one of those that said, I'm glad it happened, but I am not gonna miss you all that much. Bring on SF5.
Yeah, the game has aged terribly, in my opinion. If you want to play Option Select Fighter 4, by all means, feel free. If they re-release it, I might play it a little bit, but like, and it's mostly for the nostalgia value. It's like people who play Marvel 2 over Marvel 3, and there's nothing wrong with that if you prefer that game, but Marvel 3 is just a better game, if you ask me. They fixed a lot of the stuff that was a problem with Marvel 2. It's got its own flaws, but I generally like the latter games in most series better. That's just kind of my opinion. I'm kind of like, out with the old, in with the new kind of thing. That's how I roll with it, but I respect the hell out of how many people love Street Fighter 4, and damn, would I ever love to see this for those people so they can see how bad the game is now. No, I'm kidding.
So,
I
so
want
many
to
of you are
themselves.
headed right now to the comment section. I know. While you're on your way, can you please do us a favor, Psycho Crush the like button before you leave that nasty comment about John talking smack about your favorite game. Remember, John without the H is the one that said that.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for liking, commenting, subscribing, and checking out the Event Hubs podcast.
But John, let me ask you this though. Like, why are you pitching this as an idea? Why do you think that, the community should listen to you, kind of thing in terms of bringing this back? Why are you broaching this subject?
Well, I think that one, of course, I started with Street Fighter 4, and I think I should say I started competitively to the capacity that I'm in the fighting game community now. I would not be sitting here working with you, most likely, had it not been for Street Fighter 4. And it is that's part of what I want to get into in a little bit. I don't want to go too far, but you mentioned the nostalgia of it. And I absolutely admit, yes, there is a nostalgia factor, as there is with every one of these old games. These re-releases work, right? Capcom likes to do them, and the people like to play them. And we've had, HD Remix back in '08. There's the Third Strike Online. There's the 30th Anniversary Collection, which had multiple versions of SF2, SF3, and SF Alpha. And the Ultra SF2 with the new challenger, or the final challengers that came out for Switch. We haven't even gotten into the likes of, Resident Evil re-releases. Dream King and I joke all the time about how many times we've bought RE4 and how many times we'll probably still buy it again as it comes out for modern consoles. Anyways, the point is, yes, there's absolutely a nostalgia factor to it. Of course, we want to go back to these old games. But there's another factor to it, and that's the updated with modern tech. Now that we know what we know, and we have the technology that we have, can you go back and make these games a little cleaner? And I don't mean an overhaul. I don't mean a whole rebalancing and stuff like that. That's its own conversation. But what I mean is with like the 30th Anniversary Collection, for instance. You had old games, you brought them back. They still have all of their ridiculous balances and some bugs and things like that. But you add in things like training mode, that some of those games didn't have training modes. You add in the capacity to, or the opportunity to play online. And that's something that I think that Street Fighter 4 could use the little treatment. So it's a combination of nostalgia and modernization that would be really cool.
And hold on now, I don't want to bury the lead on this. You're saying play online. Now, you could play online Street Fighter 4 from the get-go. What do you mean play online?
Well, because the online that we have for Street Fighter 4 is 2008/2009 delayed based, Capcom not caring as much or prioritizing as much as they do now, netcode. And
Mm-hmm.
people are even widely unhappy with the 2016 rollback netcode that SF5 has. We would be talking something like a 2022, Capcom cares a lot about it, rollback netcode for a game that was widely played online and widely, like when you think about playing Street Fighter 4 though online, the whole idea that it's a very different game on and offline was huge. Like that's where that conversation happened, I think, more often than anywhere else. And then SF5, it carried over, but things have gotten better, and that gap has definitely closed a significant amount. But
And
when
then
people
from
think back,
a technical standpoint, too, just to explain this, the more powerful your machine is, the better the rollback netcode can sometimes be because you're saving game states that you roll back to, right? And for a game with a lot going on, rolling back to those game states could be a lot. It could be very intense on the the hardware that you're running. And since Street Fighter 4 is an old game, very old at this point in time, as you mentioned, it came out in 2008 in arcades and then 2009 on console. The machines now can run it gold and really put in some heavy rollback code on it and have no issues with it, or seemingly they should have no issues with it from a performance standpoint.
yes. I think there would be a new surge of excitement because I think there are a lot of people that would go back, would love Street Fighter 4. It caused a boom in the fighting game community. This is an incredibly powerful title, and by powerful I mean things really fell off after Third Strike. Now, Third Strike's regarded as one of, if not the best fighting game of all time by a significant number of people, but it wasn't a commercial success, as we've
Yeah,
definitely mentioned on this podcast.
yeah.
Capcom fighting games went into something of a dark age for about 10 years. And then Street Fighter 4 comes along, not only revitalizes Capcom fighting games, but sends the fighting game scene into a golden age. And it wasn't just SF4, but I think it's an integral factor, one of probably the biggest factor. And not only did it start it, it continued it. So then you had Marvel versus Capcom 3 come out, and you had, the new Mortal Kombat series starting in MK11. That whole franchise kind of got rebooted. And now you get to this point where there are so many fighting games come out, indie and AAA and AA and all over the place. And Street Fighter 4 it's not responsible for all of those being here, but it is responsible for shaping this scene and, like I said, reviving this scene in the
Yeah,
way that it did.
yeah.
It was very powerful. So when would this kind of a thing happen realistically? I would say Capcom Cup 2021, which will actually happen in 2022. We only have like 2 more days of 2021 left, but
I think they're calling it
February.
Capcom Cup 8 now. Like they've dropped
Oh, okay,
the
just
year, which is
yeah,
a really smart idea, and I think it's like 8 or something. But forgive me if it's
sure,
like a different number. But
sure.
yeah,
So, and I would say it's something similar to what we saw at Capcom Cup 2017. That was the year that Tokita and Mena were in grand finals, where not only were they showing the plans for SF5's next season, and it was a big deal. It wasn't a whole new game, but it was arcade edition. They were finally showing all of the characters at that Capcom Cup, and the game was kind of at a point where it needs to be reinvented so that we stick around. How are
hmm
you going to do that? Here's how we're going to do that. So it was a big deal for Street Fighter. There were other announcements, and there were certainly other places for people's attention. But then they also revealed this anniversary collection, and that came out in May of 2018. And I think that there was definitely space for both things to exist at the same time. And the reason I say that is because it feels like when you talk about it, what else have we talked about potentially being revealed at Capcom Cup in February? Street Fighter 6. And you go, is it starting to feel a little bit crowded if you've got Street Fighter 6 announced, and then you've got Street Fighter 5 as the Capcom Pro Tour center stage game for one last year, and then you're also going to release another Street Fighter 4? It's like all of a sudden that's might be a little crowded. I don't actually think it would be though, because
yeah.
I think people are going to be playing SF5, sure. SF6 not going to be out yet. You're going to see maybe some little hints here's and there's and some new, presentations of it and like, oh, here's Ryu's foot and all that, however they want to show. And then maybe a beta later on. But I don't think that game's coming out until 2023 early
Yeah.
so that it can be on the next Pro Tour. We've talked about that for sure.
It is
Um,
even possible it'll be a 2024 game. with
Oh,
COVID and all
don't
that kind of stuff.
say,
It's possible
don't
because we're seeing
say
some
that.
major delays, but I don't think it. I think we got an official confirmation of delay. I really do think it's 2023, but
Mhm.
you can't put anything past it because hey, we've said get it right. That's one of the big things you and I have said over and over again. I'd rather have them get it right and delay it a bit. So
Yeah. And so also then HD Remix came out in 2008. That was the same year that SF4 dropped in arcades. And we actually found an older interview with Capcom's Ray Jimenez where he was asked, "Are you guys worried that the game, this is the HD Remix version of SF2, might suffer in sales due to Street Fighter 4 getting released in a few months?" And the response was, "Not at all. While it's not a good idea to be right next to it in terms of release, I think that we have a good enough separation between the two. Both games appeal to wide audiences, but the hunger for old school Street Fighter with a new twist and the next step in Street Fighter gaming are equally as large." And I think that just as much applies here with the idea of a Street Fighter 6 on the horizon and a Street Fighter 5 still being played. Really, what I think you get here is you get a version of Street Fighter 4 that people feel like they can practice and play validly, legitimately online. If you have that, I don't think you should have necessarily a whole like Capcom Pro Tour circuit devoted to it, but I think that you'd have, at least for this next year, TOs putting Street Fighter 4 in as a side tournament, and you'd have plenty of people that wanted to come in and play it alongside Street Fighter 5. I think there's space for both. And Street Fighter 5 came in 2016. It was the end of Street Fighter 4 for sure. But I think that Street Fighter 5 feels relatively tired right now. Would you agree with that? Is that
yeah, oh
fair to
yeah, for
say?
sure.
So,
I mean, the game's done. Like, I mean, we're gonna get balance updates. We're gonna get a few other things, but like, the game is essentially over, and it's not an ideal time for it to be over. But it's kind of hanging on, and it's just not that beloved. Where Street Fighter 4 is maybe the most beloved Street Fighter entry ever, even over Street Fighter 2. Like that is it, and that is hard to do. I know there's some people out there who just love Street Fighter 4 way more than Street Fighter 2, and you have to tip your cap to those people because they paid a lot of your bills for a lot of years, and they probably gave Street Fighter 5 a chance, even though they didn't really want to because of all the problems with it. There's a huge legacy for Street Fighter 4. You could literally call it the best fighting game Capcom has ever released, at least from a success standpoint, and you have a damn good case for it.
yeah, and I remember. No, I'm speaking from first of all my own point of view, sure, but also the people around me. I can say there's a lot of people that still wanted to see Street Fighter 4 continue to play as a main stage game into 2016. We wanted Street Fighter 5, absolutely, bring it on. But why not Street Fighter 4? There still felt like there was plenty left in the tank. And then when Street Fighter 5 came out, of course, the big shift went over to that. And then Evo decided not to have Street Fighter 4 in 2016. And that was more or less the end of it. We saw some side tournaments and such, and they got decent play. But really, Street Fighter 4 felt like it was cut off earlier than it needed to be. It still could have thrived. And hindsight's 2020, of course. Street Fighter 5 came out as like a 70% done game, and I think we would all, and probably Capcom, also agree you should have done one more year of Street Fighter 4 and released SF5 in 2017. But that's the past. We can't change it. We also ran a poll back in, I think it was November of 2015, and I'll show it here on the screen, asking which games you would like to see on the Evo 2016 lineup. Street Fighter 4 got third place overall, second to after Street Fighter 5 and Guilty Gear Xrd Sign, with like 7% of the whole vote. People still wanted to see it. As far as me and my circle and people voting on event hubs, it was still, and I think that was reflective of the community in general. It's like not
Hmm.
everybody, but I
Yeah.
think people still wanted to see it. So how poetic would it be if SF5 kind of came in and cut the last year of SF4 short? If SF4 could come back, be reinvented a little bit and modernized, just with the things we talked about, the technology and the rollback netcode, and those two could kind of share the stage for Street Fighter V's final year. And again, I'm not saying a CPT for SF4, but I think it could be at these events, and I think a lot of people that would play SF5 would also play SF4, and I think Capcom could make some money off of it, man. I
Yeah.
think people would be happy to buy it and play it, and I think Capcom could make, sell it for $30 or so. I
I mean,
think
the
that'd
thing
be
about it
almost
is,
poetic.
take some of those sales from the Street Fighter 4 version and dump them into the Pro Tour. You know, say, hey, like if you buy the special CPT package for Street Fighter 4, like we have it for Street Fighter 5, you get like, you know, these little extra bells and whistles, and you directly support the Pro Tour. You know,
Mhm.
so you can pay an extra $10 or $5 on top of the 30 you're mentioning there, and then go from that way. You know, and you don't have to do it; just add on DLC.
Yeah. There is a so this is a question that I want to ask the audience here, and you can answer now, you can answer after we've talked about some of our answers to this, but um, is there more that you would do if Capcom were re-releasing Street Fighter 4, Ultra Street Fighter 4, and we said, okay, with better netcode, and then maybe a few other things? Is there more that you would add to it? Little things here and there. It could have to do with the menus. It could have to do with the displays, the ease of operations, anything like that. But let us know, comment if there's anything you would like to see in a re-release beyond just rollback netcode. I say that to then turn things over to you, John, because as you've noted, the PC port of Street Fighter 4 is, and I have a quote here, kind of balls.
Yeah.
So why is it kind of balls, and what's wrong with it? What would you fix if you could bring it back?
Yeah, the big thing that comes down to it's how the game handles VSync, which means, you know, for PS players, players out there, basically there's input delay and then there's frame rate issues. And finding the right setting is really hard. And then if you're playing online, if your opponent has the wrong settings, your experience is just going to be terrible. We've had that actually happen a few times internally here at Event Hubs, where we played the PC port, and it's just like, oh, we're getting massive latency issues. And sometimes even offline. Like literally, if you don't have your VSync stuff, it's like literally getting, you know, extra 5-10 frames of input delay, like, and just a bunch of problems with it. And it's not really clear kind of how to fix that. If you even go on, you know, various places, like, what do I do? Because I've got a 144 hertz monitor, because, you know, shouts to my reactions being better. Shouts to Arturo. What does he have in his profile? It's like, you know, 360 hertz reactions or something like that, which is really awesome. And he has a great guide on how to do all that kind of stuff. But regardless, there's screen tearing, there's a bunch of other issues, and it sucks even trying to play it. It's like, why would I want to play this stuff? Not only that, but the PC version also used Game for Windows Live, which means it stopped working periodically as Microsoft discontinued that service. And you can still get it working now, but like, it caused all sorts of headaches back in the day. And even then, some people actually couldn't get the game to go past the press start screen without crashing. Like, it's like, what's worse than a game that like sucks? It's a game you can't even play. And that was the case for a number of people. And like, yeah, there's fixes and stuff, but it's a myriad of problems with the PC port of Street Fighter 4, and just Capcom outsourcing, you know, like saying, hey, put rollback code in here, do a really good job of sprucing up this, you know, version of the game and make it really good. That'd be awesome. You know, that'd be a great
Mhm.
way of doing it. And since PCs are the number one platform right now, you know, do it that way. And maybe even, you know, make it cross platforms a little harder to do, especially with a release like this. So I could see them not doing that, but, you know, rollback code and fixing those issues, I'd be pretty thrilled with the game. I'd probably even buy it.
Oh, right on. Yeah, I would say maybe a few things like make ranked the 2 out of 3 that Street Fighter 5 has now. If you remember, ranked in Street Fighter 4 was just you find someone, you play one and done, and then if you find him again, great, but if not, too bad. And maybe some CFN like stats or something like that they could add in to sort of give it a little bit of extra glitter and glam on the outside. But I mean, those aren't musts. Those are just a few little things that I think they could add to it. Maybe something like I guess that game actually has online training as far as I remember, but stuff like that could be cool. Now, this is not a conclusive science experiment, but something like this has already happened, namely with Guilty Gear. Toys R Us Plus, no, Accent Core Plus R. It was re-released in on Steam in 2020. It was actually October 28th of 2020. And I went and looked at the stats to see what the numbers were like beforehand and after. And so, and you'll get the graphic here so you can follow along. But the average number of players on, I think this means at any given time, for the 12 months before rollback netcode was implemented for this game, was just 13. Okay, now then it spiked up the month that it was released, which was the 28th of October. So it's really like that day plus, you know, the last couple of days of October. And then November was like the big, like, okay, this is the anomaly because everyone's attention is on it. So I went after that. So December and then the next 12 months after that, the average number of players playing then was 224, making for a 17.2 times increase in the number of players in Guilty Gear XX Accent Core Plus R after rollback netcode was implemented. So if we look at Ultra Street Fighter 4's average number of players in the last 12 months, 148. If it were to get rollback netcode and increase by 17 times 2 times, 17.2 times, we'd have 2,545 players on average playing. And guess what the average number of players playing Street Fighter 5 has been in the last 12 months? A little bit less than that, about 100 players less than that. So I'm not saying that of course you're going to get a 17 times increase, but these are people playing on this crappy Steam version of the game, as you just laid out. There is real potential for people to jump on it and engage with this. And like you said, Guilty Gear, love you, dog, but you are not Street Fighter 4, and you don't have the legacy of Street Fighter 4. You don't have the recognition. I think that number could be significantly higher. With a kind of splash of SF4s coming back and you can play it legitimately online, that kind of message out there is going to turn some heads, you can bet. So I do think there's a lot of potential here. Does it have to happen this year? No. In fact, if Capcom's not already doing it and planning it, then we probably won't see it. But I do think there's room for it. I do think it would be interesting, like I said, sort of poetic if it happened alongside the last year of SF5 and they kind of worked in tandem and fueled each other's numbers. I really think this would be cool. And that's not just as an 09er. That's just as a sort of objective, like, this would be good for the FGC.
I don't even like the game that much, and I think it's a great idea. So this is one of the best games that Capcom has ever put out, but in the community's eyes, get it back out there again in the highest playable form that you can. When online play does not work how it should, that is breaking a huge part of the game for a lot of people. And so update it, get it out there, and let people play it in how it's meant to be played. So,
America.